What's up YouTube, I'm Kha'Zix and welcome back to the RiftGuides WildRift video. For today we are going to take a look at the 4.4D changes to all the champions in WildRift, so let's get right at it. First we have a nerf to Aatrox. This champion was overperforming in the jungle department and therefore he got a nerf to his first ability, the Darkened Blade, on his monster modifier. It now only deals 70% to monsters. With this, Aatrox's first clear is significantly slowed down, and in the later stages of the game he doesn't insta-clear camps anymore. This will make him slightly weaker, but obviously it will not put him out of the jungle department, because jungle is still his best position by 50 billion miles. Next up comes Amumu. He's getting a buff to his first ability's cooldown and his third ability's damage. The buff to his third ability should significantly increase his clearing time because it's on level 1 plus 20 damage. Next up on the chopping block is Darius. Do you remember this interaction that if you used stasis against the Darius ultimate, that the ultimate would go on cooldown? Well, not anymore because they removed this outplay potential. Now it's just reset to 5 seconds cooldown. So every type of outplay against these champions was just removed unless you take Veil Enchant and buff your ally when he's about to get ulted. Fiddlesticks is apparently performing too well and therefore he's receiving another nerf, and this time for his first and second ability. The Federation is going down and the Bountiful Harvest bonus damage to monsters is also going down. Does this mean that Fiddlesticks is dead? No, not at all actually. It just means that he is slightly weaker than before. Because we all know we'll still group up at random objectives, get killed by his ultimate, never ward against him, and never invade him in the early game. The change that's coming to Darius is also coming to Garen. So if you ult somebody and the person uses stasis, your ult gets a 5-second cooldown instead of being completely on cooldown. And I like the moves out of range kind of thing, because that is, I think, not a thing for Garen. He jumps over walls following you with ultimate. There was even a clip from a tournament where a person was recalling and he was killed in base because the Garen ultimate followed him. And now we come to the juicer parts of this patch, and we don't really understand why. Jayce hasn't been as dominant in lane as we had hoped. How is that possible? Jayce is one of the most broken champions during the laning phase, and if anything, falls behind if the enemy champions are rather good against him, or the player is just bad. Jayce is not a simple champion and therefore his win rate isn't that high, so just giving him more stats, making him more powerful, doesn't fix the issue because a bad player on Jayce will still perform poorly. But here we have the changes. He gains 4 base AD, 7 HP per level, and his hammer form is getting more scaling damage and more flat damage. His cannon form's first ability is also gaining more scaling damage. At least they're nerfing the damage to monsters to 50% on both abilities, but it will only mean that Jayce now starts with his second ability rather than his first ability, and his clear shouldn't be that much slowed down in direct comparison. Or rather, this champion can just do something very funky, do free camps into something really sketchy in a lane or the enemy jungle and just force his pressure and power right into the enemy's face, because this champion's power is super high, so you need to abuse it. The only good thing I'm seeing about these ultimate changes is coming for Kayn, because his ultimate in a darkened form, when the target is killed, the Kayn is inside, will not trigger the health regeneration of the Kayn going out again. But in this case, he will now finally get the healing from the target being killed. So your teammates can't really grief you anymore when you just try to hide being low HP in someone's body and they just randomly blast a target. Another buff nobody will ever get to understand is coming for Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix is supposed to be on the weaker spectrum according to Riot, so they're buffing him. So for his passive, the Unseen Threat, they increase the base damage from 6 to 10, and the scaling from 40% attack damage to 50% bonus attack damage. So yeah guys, if you believe that Kha'Zix didn't have enough damage, now he has even more. So if there's a champion you want to permaban, it's probably going to be Kha'Zix because it's the easiest jungler with the highest impact compared to other champions, similar to Hakram before he was nerfed. He's a slightly bit worse now, but he's still broken. So yeah, just because something got nerfed or buffed doesn't mean they're automatically broken, because Kha'Zix was already really good before this. It just makes him even better. The next buff we are seeing is coming to Lucian, and this time I'm rather happy. Lucian has really been struggling in the meta and he can't really carry against most of the champions. But that's most of the time an issue that's coming from his kit and range in general, and not just through his stats. If you overbuff a champion like this and give him even more stats, then you might turn him into a problem that just automatically wins early and mid game every single time and only loses to team differential or people that don't want to close out games. So in this case, the buffs are growth to attack damage from 3 to 4, and a slight buff to his first ability scaling, and a tiny nerf in the early game when it comes to its flat damage, but overall this ability is going to be better. Another weird change I'm seeing is Malphite. So, as all of you know, Malphite is a situational pick if you want to play him tank, like you play into full AD compositions, and otherwise you would never pick tank Malphite because it's his only purpose, similar to Aramis, right? So what we're seeing now is a buff to tank Malphite, even though he was already very good into like AD champions. So what are they doing? They're buffing his passive shield from 9% maximum health to 11% massive health, and they're also changing his third ability to grant him more armor passively to deal more damage with the empowered auto attack, and the following attacks also deal more damage, and everything scales better with armor now. Another buff is coming to Misfortune, and they say that she's rather unlucky in the dragon lane, so they're buffing her base attack damage by 4, her base mana by 30, and the mana per level by 9. This champion is a massive lane bully and doesn't even scale too badly, but the biggest issue is her immobility. So if the enemy has certain assassins or is just very good in catching you, then this champion dies more often. So more damage will not be the issue because she didn't really lack damage in the first place. She lacked survivability. The next nerf is coming to Nilah, and here we have a change to her first ability, Formless Blade. The damage to monster modifiers goes down from 60% to 25%. So all in all, it does not really matter. The reason is the following, because these splash auto attacks that you get empowered from your first ability are not mitigated or lowered in damage, and only the first ability's cast, so it barely even matters because even before it wasn't even that much of a damage source, with only dealing 60% to monsters and now only dealing 25%. So it's like even less of a half an auto attack in 4 seconds, so it really isn't that much. Another nerf which is very confusing is coming to Orianna. This is not PC League, this is WildRift, and Orianna takes a long time to scale to be even remotely good enough to carry games. So what are the changes? Her health per level goes down from 115 to 104, her passive bonus damage is getting lowered massively, but her ultimate's damage is getting increased with a sizable amount of damage in the flat department and the scaling department. But again, I don't really see the reason why Orianna is getting these changes because this champion was neither too strong nor anything along those lines. She was, if anything, a tiny bit too weak compared to other champions. But given the nature of the game and the time she gets to scale, she was still a very good champion that had value every single game. But nerfing her laning phase and making her more vulnerable during the laning phase with the changes to the passive and the base HP is just a very confusing thing to me. Another very confusing thing to me is Pyke, and we are seeing another buff to this champion. Here we have a damage buff to his third ability, and we have a gold generation buff to his ult in the assist department and for himself. So why exactly do we keep on buffing a champion that's already overpowered? I can tell you the reason, and you can pretty much guess the reason. This champion is way too hard to play for the casual player, which is completely fine. But as a consequence, Riot keeps on buffing him to get closer to the 50% win rate threshold, because then, in their eyes, the champion is balanced. But if this champion, for example in the highest tier by maybe 10 players out of all the players on the entire server, is completely abusive and completely broken and they just win every game with this champion, then nothing is going to happen and the people will still be upset because this champion in theory is very broken, but in reality, well, as you see for the majority of the player base, this champion is simply not good enough due to how the game is played, how good they are, how much they know about the game, etc, etc. And there's another change later on that I will explain to you as to why it's happening, even though this champion is literally terrible if you play against actual players. Another victim, let's say victim, to this kind of buff agenda is Samira. Samira has been receiving buffs over buffs every single time, and she gets even more armor per level now and magic resist. And not only this, her damage on her first ability is also getting increased in the flat department and the scaling. And the reason why this is happening is the same as what happens with Pyke. This champion is not as easy to play and mostly requires you to have a specific support to engage for you, or you are abnormally good at reading the situation and going in at the perfect timer. If you however play this champion in duo, keep in mind not 5Q, you will completely run over people because you can just all in on level 1 on cooldown and the enemy cannot really win. And now let's talk about Sona. Sona by herself is not really a good champion. She cannot really do anything and has to scale. And here I put emphasis on scaling. She cannot defend herself, she cannot really help people in the early game because all of her abilities basically do nothing in the early stages, and the only way that she is gonna have value is in the mid to late game. But the issue is, it isn't about Sona's skill of achieving this point, it's about the opponent's lack of skill to deny her to get to that point. So all of you know the state of solo queue. It's completely inflated and you play as a 100 mark player against 1 mark people. Not only this, you play in free queue, 5Q, duo queue, all of this, right? And every single time you see a Sona, how does the Sona win lane and how does the Sona get to survive? Is it because of her own virtue? Or is it because of the enemy's inability to know what to do against this champion? And with this, we get to the real problem. So, solo queue is a casual place of people having fun, and that's completely okay. But if we, for example, had access to statistics for legendary queue, and we could look at the Immortal Legend portion of legendary queue, I'd be very curious to see Sona and Sona's win rate, because I'm almost certain this champion would be sub 40% win rate in legendary queue. Well, in the higher ranks of legendary queue. But this champion, similar to Janna, they all fit very well into the category of you can't really mess anything up, and if the enemy allows you to play as you do, then, well, you probably get to win the game due to scaling on your champion. But if the enemy knows what to do, you'll get completely stomped and shot to Narnia, and there's nothing you can do as a person because your champion cannot keep up with their champion. And this is the exact story I can tell about all my games I've played in solo queue against Sona, Kayle, Nilah, all of these champions, with Nilah being the exception because she actually can do something early game, but all of these champions go negative for 15 billion deaths, but they still manage to get back into the game because people run it down on cooldown. But that doesn't make them a good champion. It makes them function and work, yes, but obviously you don't want to play like this, because you obviously don't want to play like the Inting Scion, but it works due to the nature of the game and the matchmaking as it is. So if you were to ask me, is Sona a good champion? For me, no. For the majority of the player base, I would say yes. The reason is just the skill difference from like people is so big, and if you don't know what to do, like as a support, like your macro isn't on point, you don't know how to pilot your champion perfectly, there's so many things you can do wrong. For example, on Pyke, there's so many things you can do wrong, you can just die, you can make a mistake, etc, etc. But on Sona, it all depends on the enemy, unless, well, you just run literally into the tower and suicide, which is a very bad choice. But yeah, you get the idea. So every champion that is rather passive or doesn't do anything without any, well, repercussions is very good in a solo queue context if you are not one of the quote-unquote best players. Because personally, I can promise you, like, if you're a good player and you choose, for example, Karma over Sona every single time and you know what you're doing, you will win you will win so much more with Karma than you can ever do with Sona, because playing with as a Sona, nothing depends really on you, and you're just giving away all the responsibility outside of a few tiny mechanics you can use to your advantage, and therefore gains like tiny benefits during fights. Another cool change we have is coming to Thresh. Like normally when you turn around to hook somebody, or well, you hook somebody, your character turns around and basically indicates where you're throwing the hook to. With this change, this is no more. The next buff is coming to Tryndamere. His slow on the second ability is getting a massive increase, making his life a lot easier. Also, his third ability's cooldown is going down and the damage is going up in the sense of scaling. And if they ever, in the history of WildRift, bring back the crit reset mechanic in the jungle department, Tryndamere will be one of the best junglers in the game simply due to how he functions and how he can abuse matchmaking to just use split push and GPM through jungle to your advantages. The next buff is coming to Urgot. And he more or less has an item issue other than anything else. For example, if he had access to items as a quote-unquote melee champion, this champion would be a lot better. But for example, because he's a ranged champion and therefore only gets limited benefits from, for example, Death Stance, he has kind of trouble into specific champions, or rather in the entire meta, simply because he is so short-ranged. So as a consequence, he's now getting a buff to his ability Disdain, the cooldown is going down and the shield is getting an increase, and the ultimate's cooldown is also going down, but that doesn't barely make any difference because ultimate cooldowns and the impact on the game, you already know, unless there are massive changes, don't really do too much. A change I'm very happy to see is another nerf to Vladimir, because this champion is too easy to play and has too much impact for what you have to do with him. So his first ability is getting a flat damage nerf and a bonus damage nerf on the empowered version. Not only this, also the movement speed increase from his second ability is lowered from 35% to 27.5%. This is not going to kill Vladimir, it just makes him slightly weaker, so all hold your horses, this champion is not bad now. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see the Ziggs rework coming on the 4th of January, and it's quite a wild rework because it removes a big feature of how you have to play this champion to be very strong during the laning phase. So what are they doing? So basically his passive was an empowered auto attack which dealt bonus damage to towers. This is now removed, but now we have a change to all his abilities. All his abilities now deal 50% damage to turrets. And not only this, his bouncing bomb now deals more damage because it's enhanced by his passive, which sounds very weird. It's also bouncing differently now, so take a look at what is happening here. They're removing one layer of gameplay by putting emphasis on auto-attacking around your passive, which is skill expression, and to just add this to your, well, spell you spam anyway. Not only this spell now is able to deal damage to towers, which means you can literally siege from Narnia distance onto towers. You can just throw things at towers from maximum distance when you already have nothing else to do, and slowly chip away these towers, which makes Ziggs one of the most broken champions in the game, because you can siege without even having minions as long as you have people around you to protect you, and eventually you'll take down towers. You also see early now when you can execute towers with your second ability, and you can detonate your satchel charge while it's already in the air. But hey, at least we are seeing a nerf to Ziggs Mega Inferno Bomb, at least for the middle part, cause now this champion doesn't deal this massive amount of damage with the ult anymore, but only slightly less. Well, it's not slightly less, it's a lot less, but if you see the other changes that his abilities now can deal damage to towers, that is absolutely absurd and is something that needs to be looked at ASAP again, because this champion will be so much pick and ban for anyone who just wants wins for free, because you can literally play quote-unquote inting Ziggs now. Like, huh? That stuff's crazy. I really love, I will look into this and I'll make something crazy happen. Now for the last gameplay changes, we have item changes. Maw of Mortius is getting a change. Previously, it was only stacked up by using auto attacks, but now it also stacks up by physical damage dealt by abilities, which is a massive buff because it wasn't as easy to stack, which makes this item so much better. An item which completely followed the meta because of the game's pace and overall the, well, gameplay of the game, is Amaranth Twin Guard, and as a consequence the item is getting 100 gold cheaper and gets 5 more armor to make it more appealing to buy. However, with the game being as it is, unless we get into really late game to 4th and 5th item slot, or rather 5th and 6th item slot if you account for boots, this item will rarely be bought. And last but not least, let's take a look at skins. Blood Moon Tryndamere releasing on the 1st of January. Prestige Heartsteel Yone also on the 1st of January. Hextech Ziggs 4th, Project Pyke 10th, Project Varus 10th, also beautiful skin, and Project Warwick on the 10th as well. And we have a skin update to Jade Dragon Wukong, so if you want this skin as fast as possible for a low price, get it now, because otherwise it will be gone from the shops. And that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm also going to make another video on how Riot balances things to give you a better idea as to what to expect from the next patches. And anyways, we see each other soon. Maybe I'll make a little stream. We see. Anyways, goodbye.